On the side of a dusty road, a sophisticated imported car was parked. It was stained with splashes of mud all over, and its windshield was a mess. Next to the car, 3 young men stood, each under 20 years old. They were known for their daring pranks, extravagant spending, and always dressing in the best clothes. The 3 were friends from the same university. Pedro was destined to be a doctor among them, growing up believing they could do whatever they wanted. Their days were filled with luxurious dinners, nightclubs, and endless parties. With such a hustle in their lives, they often forgot about their classes. After a night out, on that particular day, instead of heading home after the party, they decided to venture further out of the city. The rumor was that a rich farmer's son was throwing a huge party. Pedro, Bruno, and Diogo couldn't resist such an invitation. The party ended, and upon returning to the shiny car parked by the sea, Bruno's eyes lit up with a mischievous idea. Hey, how about we take this beauty for a wild ride? I heard there's a road that cuts through pure, unexplored forest. Pedro, always sensible, replied, Bruno, this car isn't good for dirt roads. Are you sure about this? Diogo, laughing and hugging the two, said, come on, how bad can it be? And so they embarked on a bumpy journey. Dust rose as the car groaned in protest, dodging fallen branches, leaping through puddles, and avoiding sharp rocks. The adventure of the 3 began. Bruno, this car isn't made for these roads, Ahol exclaimed, clinging to the seat. More lighthearted, Pedro responded, Bruno, adrenaline-filled eyes will soon find themselves back on asphalt, breathing a sigh of relief. However, an unmistakable sound broke the moment, the slow hiss of escaping air. Diogo looked in the rearview mirror. We just got a flat tire. Both tires were flat. Bruno slumped in his seat. Okay, maybe it wasn't such a good idea. Diogo retorted, serious. You think? In the middle of the darkness. Pedro took out his phone. I'll call a tow truck, he said. It'll be exciting, but it might take a while to get here. I'm out of money, Bruno said worriedly. Should we call my dad? No way, we're supposed to be in class right now, Diogo reminded them. Bruno murmured, if he finds out about this, he'll block my card. After thinking for a bit, Diogo suggested, first, let's get back to the city, clean up, and then one of us can come back with a tow truck. Bruno and Pedro exchanged looks, realizing Diogo's plan made sense. The smell of alcohol still enveloped them, evidence of the wild night. Dawn was breaking, and they were beginning to sober up. Hitchhiking was new to them. The idea of sticking out their thumb, hoping for a stranger's kindness, was strange and humiliating, but as the saying goes, there's always a first time. Even privileged youth can find themselves in unusual situations, dealing with the common man's problems. On that stretch of road, cars were scarce. We might be stuck here until noon, lamented Diogo. Pedro, trying to be reasonable, replied, relax, Diogo, this isn't the city. We don't have regular public transport. Bruno, usually more patient, was about to lose it when he saw the silhouette of a bus appearing in the distance. Guys, look, a bus is coming our way, he exclaimed. Immediately, both Diogo and Pedro were on alert. Their previous frustration was replaced by a glimmer of hope. Stranded in the middle of nowhere, without their wallets or car, the young men felt a vulnerability they were unaccustomed to. They were eager to rid themselves of it. The bus approached, and the trio could see the driver clearly. She was a woman, probably in her 30s, adorned with a distinctive scarf. Pedro tried to bring a bit of humor as he got on the bus. Looks like our chariot has arrived. His comment provoked laughter from his friends, and the collective laughter was loud enough to attract curious and disapproving looks from some passengers. Unfazed, the guys looked for their seats while paying the fare. They carelessly tossed the money towards the driver, as if they were just tipping her. A street musician might keep the change, maybe help with the makeup, Diogo commented insolently. She probably can't even afford quality products, Bruno added, causing another wave of laughter among the 3. The driver's cheeks flushed, clearly surprised by the comments, but she focused on the road. Besides her driving duties that day, she had the additional responsibility of managing fares and passengers. The rowdy behavior of the three young men was clearly testing her patience. Finally, she partially turned to address them. Keep your voices down. This isn't a private transport, the driver said. The trio was taken aback by the driver's comment. They were used to receiving agreements, compliments in restaurants where staff fawned over them, and shops literally rolling out the red carpet, ensuring these wealthy customers felt attended to at every moment. This kind of deference was almost routine in their lives, but today they found their match in the bus driver, not because of their antics. Her objective was clear: to drive safely and follow the rules. However, the guys weren't willing to let this go without causing a fuss. You should keep your eyes on the road, Diogo began, raising his voice so the whole bus could hear. Whose idea was it to let a woman drive the bus? Aren't there any men around who can do the job? He taunted. Pedro and Bruno's raucous laughter, resembling that of hyenas, cut through the air. Tanya gripped the steering wheel tightly but remained calm. She had heard similar comments before, but hearing them from these spoiled brats was especially painful. Silently adjusting her scarf, she made a precise turn. In about 40 minutes, she would be free of the troublesome trio that had found their way onto her route that day. Tanya was a recent addition to this route. Before this, she drove a compact bus through the heavy city traffic, but her heart longed for the freedom of the open road. It had always been her dream to drive a bus on longer intercity routes. Since she was 18, she had been behind the wheel, mastering the art of driving a wide range of vehicles, from motorcycles to huge trucks. Her passion for commanding large vehicles was not just a personal choice, it was a legacy that stemmed from the countless memories she made with her father during her formative years. Tanya's father, an experienced driver, used to take her on his trips. These were not just casual journeys, but opportunities for her to witness the world of big machines. She would sit beside him in the noisy truck cabins, feel the roar of the semi-trucks beneath her, and even experience the lively conversations on buses. Each trip with her father was an adventure, a lesson. She watched, fascinated, as he maneuvered those immense vehicles through narrow alleys and highways. Over time, Tanya not only acquired the skills but also her father's love for driving. As she grew, it wasn't just about the vehicles but the memories, lessons, and bonds she shared with her father that fueled her passion. Whenever Luisa questioned her obsession with trucks and buses, Tanya took a deep breath before responding. Luisa, you've known me for a long time. You know how close I was to my father and how much time we spent on the road. These trucks and buses aren't just vehicles to me, they are my childhood memories. I don't expect you to understand, but it's part of who I am. For Tanya, driving wasn't just about being behind the wheel, it was her way of finding peace amid the chaos of her life. The familiar rumble of the engine and the open road helped her find clarity, especially after the tumultuous previous year. Her husband, Gabriel, had abandoned her, and their son André. The rumors in town suggested he had fallen for a younger, wealthier woman. Many in her circle weren't surprised, saying Gabriel was never the marrying type. But to Tanya, he had once been her everything. Tanya would never forget her first day working at the bus terminal. As soon as she walked in, the place buzzed with whispers and snickers. Some drivers seemed amused, while others clearly disapproved of a female driver, and making sure everyone heard. What's next? A woman fixing engines? A driver mocked, provoking laughter. Tanya took a deep breath, controlling the urge to show any sign of weakness. I'm here to do my job, just like you, as she said, her voice firm but her heart racing. The days and weeks that followed weren't easy. More than once, Tanya questioned her choices, but she refused to give up. She stayed late to practice driving her empty bus around the terminal to perfect every maneuver. Tanya's reputation at the bus terminal underwent a significant change after a dramatic incident on one of her regular routes. She was driving her usual route when chaos erupted ahead. A reckless driver swerved into her lane. With only seconds to react, she chose to swerve her bus into a tree rather than risk a direct collision. The impact was so violent that the front of the bus crumpled like a soda can, trapping her inside. To make matters worse, sparks from the impact ignited a fire due to a ruptured fuel line, turning the vehicle into a ticking time bomb. Tanya's instincts took over. She immediately pulled the bus over to the side of the road, grabbed the fire extinguisher from its mount, and ran toward the burning vehicle. With the efficiency and confidence of someone who had undergone emergency training, she fought the flames and wrestled with the mangled bus door, trying to free the injured driver. Her tenacity was rewarded with a burst of strength, fueled by adrenaline. She managed to pull the man from the wreckage just seconds before the bus exploded into a fiery inferno. As ambulance sirens wailed in the distance, signaling the arrival of help, the bus passengers gathered around, praising her. Back at the bus terminal, news of Tanya's bravery spread quickly. The same colleagues who had mocked her now looked at her with newfound respect. She was no longer just a female bus driver, she was a savior. This pivotal moment altered the dynamics at the terminal, serving as a reminder that courage and competence are not determined by gender. Tanya's fearless actions led to a shift in perception. It was only later, when the adrenaline subsided, that she truly comprehended the damage, burns on her hands and face, leaving painful reminders of that terrifying day. While she could hide the marks on her arms with clothing, a significant scar on her forehead became an involuntary focal point. Many friends offered advice on how she could conceal the scar, some suggesting she grow her hair to create bangs that would cover it. But Tanya, always practical and true to herself, chose another solution. She began wearing a headscarf. Not only did it effectively mask the scar, but it also kept her vision clear and free of hair. Over time, the headscarf evolved from a functional choice to a symbol of her bravery. However, something weighed on her heart. The man whose life she had risked her own to save never made an effort to thank her. Tanya did not expect grand gestures or financial rewards. A simple bouquet of her beloved white roses would have warmed her heart, or even a handful of wild daisies, which she often spotted and picked during her trips, would have meant a lot to her. Nevertheless, she continued her routes with her usual dedication, often placing fresh flowers on her dashboard, driving past the exact spot where she once faced danger head-on. Pedro, Diogo, and Bruno had become more audacious over time, acting as if they were untouchable. Their disruptive behavior was not limited to Tanya, they also tormented other passengers. Tanya had reached her limit. "I've warned you before, either calm down or find another ride," as she said firmly, continuing to drive and mind her own business. What's that thing on your head? Is it some kind of driver uniform?" Pedro taunted, pointing to Tanya's scarf. Tanya's vision blurred as tears filled her eyes. The bus was full of vulnerable passengers, including the elderly and children, making her feel even more isolated. Memories of past hardships surged, amplifying her current frustration. The abandonment by her ex-husband, the cruel comments from colleagues, and the condescension from certain passengers combined into a storm of emotions. With a fiery determination, Tanya slammed on the brakes, removed her headscarf, and pointed to the door with a resolute voice. "Get out now. Walk the rest of the way or call your parents." "I don't care, but you're not coming with me." Pedro and his friends hesitated for a moment, but the sight of Tanya wielding the fire extinguisher, not to attack, but to emphasize her point, made them think twice. They hurried off the bus, realizing they had finally met their match. Left by the roadside, the trio's arrogant attitude dissipated, replaced by a growing sense of embarrassment. They began their walk back to the city, trying to hitchhike without much luck. But in a moment that initially seemed like a fortunate turn of events, a familiar car pulled up a short distance away. The car's sheen glinted in the afternoon sun. As it reversed, Pedro recognized the distinctive features of the vehicle. It was his brother Estevam's most prized possession. "Diogo, Bruno, looks like our ride's here." "Thank God for family," Pedro said, eager for the comfort of Estevam's leather seats, especially after the long walk. But when Estevam got out of his car, any hope of a friendly reception vanished. His posture was stiff, his face serious and expressionless like a marble statue. "Did your car break down or something?" Estevam finally asked. We got a flat tire," Pedro mumbled. "You know there's a jack in the trunk, right?" Pedro hesitated, then admitted, both tires went flat." Estevam sighed deeply, rubbing his temples. Pedro, how many times do I have to bail you out? When are you going to start taking responsibility? I can't keep rescuing you. Estevam always found it hard to understand his younger brother's recklessness. Pedro had privileges that many could only dream of: a first-class education, a fancy car, and the freedom to pursue his passions without financial worries. What concerned Estevam wasn't envy or disdain for Pedro's carefree life, it was genuine concern. He often blamed Pedro's friends for his unruly behavior. Estevam believed that if Pedro surrounded himself with more focused and ambitious individuals, he would be positively influenced. He knew from personal experience how the company one keeps can shape a person's character and decisions. Since he was young, Estevao was captivated by the world of automobiles, watching his father, Samuel, transform from a humble car salesman into the owner of a vast chain of dealerships. This gave him a sense of purpose and responsibility. Samuel was still involved in many aspects of the business, but the daily management had been passed on to Estevao. He had numerous responsibilities, and every minute of his day was precious. The last thing he wanted was to spend his time chasing after his rebellious brother. After dropping off Diogo and Bruno, the drive home was filled with awkward silence. The weight of unspoken words hung in the air as the car glided smoothly down the road. Finally, Estevao broke the silence. Look, Pedro, he began, choosing his words carefully. I understand that you want to enjoy life, have adventures, and create memories, and I really want that for you. But reckless behavior is not the way, especially after last night. I've always told you how much I despise drunk driving. It's not just about your safety but about everyone on the road. I just want you to understand the risks and think before you act. That's all. Estevao's voice, though firm, also held a tone of deep concern. He hoped his message would resonate with his younger brother, guiding him toward a better path. Estevao's deep aversion to drunk drivers wasn't unfounded. Just a year earlier, he had been the victim of a terrible car accident caused by a drunk driver. The impact was so severe that he was plunged into a coma. The doctors weren't sure if he would wake up, and for 3 agonizing months, his family watched, waiting and praying for his recovery. Although he managed to recover, the scars, both physical and emotional, remained. Memories of that fateful night still haunted him, giving him nightmares. It was a chapter of his life he wished to close, but the trauma often resurfaced when he saw others heading down the same reckless path. Pedro was acutely aware of this painful history. Even if Estevao avoided mentioning it, drunk driving was enough for Pedro to connect the dots, realizing the depth of concern behind Estevao's words. Every time they talked about the issue, it was a subtle reminder of the harrowing ordeal Estevao had endured and the value of life itself. That evening, after parking her bus in the depot, Tanya began her usual end-of-day inspection. She often found lost items on her bus, usually toys or umbrellas. As she walked through the bus, a black object caught her attention between the seat and the panel, a cell phone. The memories of the 3 rowdy boys immediately flooded her mind. With mixed feelings, she picked up the phone, slipping it into her pocket. Upon arriving home, the aroma of the evening meal filled the air, a welcome distraction. It was a simple dinner but full of love for her son, André, and her mother, Isabella. Sitting at the table, they shared stories of their day, with André animatedly recounting his school adventures. After dinner, while Tanya and André played a board game, the forgotten phone began to vibrate. Cautiously, Tanya answered, her voice a bit defensive. The voice on the other end was eager. Hello, ma'am. I believe I left my phone on your bus. Can I come by to pick it up? Remembering the earlier incident, Tanya asked, were you the one who made a comment about my headscarf? Pedro winced, the regret evident in his voice. He hoped to retrieve his phone without delving into the unpleasant events of the previous day. Ma'am, sincerely apologize. We were out of line, especially after drinking too much. What we said was wrong. Can I have my phone back? Hearing the sincerity in his voice, Tanya softened a bit. You can come by tomorrow before 7 a.m. or after 8 p.m. The next day, still carrying the weight of his actions, Pedro asked his brother Estevao for help. He needed moral support, though he omitted the details of the incident. Soon they found themselves at Tonia's door, Pedro's anxiety growing by the second. "Could you get the phone for me?" Preferring to stay in the car, Pedro nervously asked his older brother, sensitive to his excitement. Why don't you want to go alone?" After a pause, Pedro admitted, "We had a disagreement with her on the bus yesterday. I'd rather not face her again." Sighing and shaking his head, Estevao decided to go alone. He approached the house and knocked. After a moment, Tonia answered, her eyes landing on Estevao while she held Pedro's phone in her hand. "Hello, I'm Estevao, Pedro's brother. I've come to pick up his phone," he explained. Tonia was momentarily surprised, recognizing Estevao as the young man she had rescued from the terrible car accident. She remained silent, handing him the phone. Confused by her silence, Estevao thanked her. Thank you," he said, starting to turn away, but before he could leave the porch, Tonia spoke, her voice firm, "Tell your brother he needs to learn some manners. Making jokes about someone's appearance is not okay." Estevao's expression turned serious. "I apologize for what my brother did. He has a lot of growing up to do. I'll talk to him," he said. Before stepping off the porch, Estevao took a moment to observe the scarf Tonia was wearing. It wasn't mere curiosity, but a sense of déjà vu. As Tonia began to close the door, Estevao hesitated before asking, "I hope it doesn't seem imprudent of me, but what's the story behind the scarf?" Tonia hesitated for a moment, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. She looked at Estevao and took a deep breath. "I'm just happy to see you out of the hospital," she finally whispered. The pieces of the puzzle fell into place for Estevao. Tonia was the woman who had rescued him from the flaming wreckage of the car. He felt a wave of emotions, from gratitude to shame for not recognizing her before. "I didn't realize, Tanya. I'm sorry. After the accident, I had memory issues." Tonia felt understanding. "It's all right. I didn't do it to be recognized, I just did what I felt was right." Estevao took a deep breath, searching for words. Thank you," he finally whispered, "for everything. You are truly amazing." As Estevao returned to the car, the revelation weighed heavily on him. The woman who risked her life to save him was now someone his younger brother had thoughtlessly mocked. The contrast was stark, and it disturbed his conscience. He replayed the conversation in his mind, admiring Tonia's humility. Approaching the car, he looked back at Tonia's house, noting the simple exterior and the well-tended garden. She was a hero, yet she lived an everyday, modest life. He felt a mix of guilt for not recognizing his savior earlier and anger at his brother for disrespecting her. Pedro, noticing his brother's long absence, grew impatient. What took so long?" he asked as Estevao got into the car. Estevao looked at Pedro, his eyes filled with a mixture of disbelief and disappointment. That woman Tonia, she's the one who saved me from the car accident. The scarf that you and your friends ridiculed hides the scars she got." Estevao's tone weighed heavily on Pedro. The memory of the day he learned about the accident flashed in his mind. Despite the disagreements and disputes they had growing up, the bond between them was undeniable. Knowing he had mocked and belittled a woman who had risked her life to save his brother filled Pedro with shame and regret. Days and weeks passed, and everyone started to find their rhythm again. Pedro, after facing the harsh reality of his actions and receiving a serious reprimand from his parents, realized he had been adrift. He reconnected with his medical studies, understanding the enormous responsibility that came with his chosen profession. After all, becoming a doctor wasn't just about prestige, it was about making a difference and saving lives. Besides his studies, Pedro had another aspiration. This new goal wasn't for personal gain or recognition. Instead, it stemmed from a deep desire to give back and make amends for past wrongs. Pedro had spoken with one of his professors, who was also a surgeon. A few weeks later, Pedro found himself outside Tonia's house again, but this time it was early in the morning. He parked his car and waited for her to come out of her house. Stepping out of the car, Pedro held a large bouquet of flowers. His heart pounded as he approached her. The morning sun shone, making the dew on the grass glisten. Everything seemed surreal. It was his chance to correct a small mistake in a sea of wrongs. Hi Tanya, good to see you again, Pedro said with a nervous but sincere smile. She turned around, her eyes widening in surprise as she saw him holding a colorful bouquet of flowers. Hi, what's going on? Tanya asked, clearly confused. My name is Pedro. These flowers are for you, he said, extending the bouquet to her. And would you come with me to meet my professor today? Tanya looked even more confused. I have to go to work, she said. Pedro smiled, relief in his eyes. Don't worry, I already talked to your boss. You have the day off. Why are you doing all this? Pedro's face grew serious. I'm sorry for what I did the other day. I was drunk, and it was stupid. I found out that you were the one who saved my brother Estevao. I want to do something for you. They drove in silence to a private medical clinic. Before going in, Pedro looked at Tanya. You don't have to worry about anything, okay? We're here to see a doctor about your scars, and don't worry about the cost. It's all taken care of, he said. Tanya looked at him, her eyes filled with tears. It was hard to believe this was the same Pedro who had mocked her. It was a shocking but heartwarming turnaround. Pedro gently hugged her and said, Everything is going to be okay. Estevao came looking for you, you know, Pedro continued. I understand you're the type who doesn't expect anything in return for doing something good, but I want to make this right. If you'll allow me. Tanya was touched. She felt a wave of emotion and finally said, Thank you, Pedro. I never expected this, but thank you. For Pedro, it felt like a moment of redemption. He still had much to learn, but helping Tanya was a step in the right direction. He was beginning to understand the impact of his actions on others and was determined to continue becoming a better person. Dr. Barbosa was one of the top plastic surgeons at the clinic. With years of experience, he specialized in restoring and reconstructing appearances. After a comprehensive evaluation, including tests and consultations, Tanya was scheduled for surgery. A week later, Tanya underwent the procedure and everything went well. Dr. Barbosa was pleased with the results. She spent a few days at the clinic for postoperative care before being discharged with detailed instructions. During this time, Pedro became an unexpected source of support. He would often drop by, bringing fresh groceries, preparing meals, and even helping with household chores. He also spent time with Tanya's young son. Playing with Andre and sharing stories, Pedro also offered assistance to Tanya's elderly mother, ensuring her medications were in order and she had everything she needed. Witnessing the daily challenges and joys of this humble family, Pedro felt humbled. The once reckless young man found a new perspective on life. He realized how blessed he was, not just materially, but with the privilege of education and opportunities. Yet, in his former mindset, he had taken everything for granted. Spending time with Tanya and her family, seeing their resilience, bond and simple joys, filled Pedro with a newfound appreciation for life's blessings. His heart felt fuller, his purpose clearer. The gratitude and love reflected in Tanya's eyes every time he visited were enough to confirm that he was on the right path, making tremendous progress. Samuel and his wife Carla began to notice a distinct change in Pedro. Gone were the days when he would stumble home in the early hours after a reckless night of partying. Now it was more likely to find him with books in hand, immersed in his studies, or waking up at dawn to seize the day. His transformation was unmistakable. One night, while the family was in the living room, Pedro rushed to his room, grabbed something, and quickly left. They exchanged looks, each silently acknowledging the noticeable change in his behavior. There was no need for words. With a laugh and a raised eyebrow, Samuel remarked, "Looks like our boy is finally growing up." Carla felt a proud smile spreading across her lips. "About time," as she replied. Her emotions were a mix of relief and pride for the young man Pedro was becoming. Dani stood in front of the mirror, tears streaming down her face. For the first time in a long while, she felt she could look at herself without being reminded of the scars. She touched her reflection, moved. At that moment, Pedro's car pulled up in front of the house. He emerged with arms full of grocery bags and a large box featuring a toy bus on its side. As he entered the house, Isabella, Tonya's mother, couldn't help but chuckle. "Oh, Pedro, you really should stop bringing so many gifts. You're spoiling Andre too much," as she joked, as he set down the bags and the large box in the living room. This one though is a toy bus, just like the one your mom drives. Thought it would make him happy." Tonya came out to see what was happening. When she saw the toy bus, her eyes lit up, reflecting the newfound vibrancy in her life. "You're amazing, Pedro." "Thank you," as she said. "No need to thank me," Pedro replied. "You've already done so much for us." Pedro's family was accustomed to their Friday dinners together, but this Friday was different. Everyone was seated and ready, except for Pedro when he walked in the door. Carla couldn't resist asking about his frequent and mysterious absences lately. Smiling, Pedro looked at his brother Estevao and then turned to his mother. "Mom, remember how I used to pester you asking for a sister when I was little?" His mother chuckled. "Oh, you were relentless, dear. Estevao here wasn't too thrilled with your requests, since he was already your brother." Laughter filled the room, but it was interrupted when Pedro's phone buzzed with a new message. Pedro stood up, his expression turning serious. Well, I think I found someone I'd like to call sister." Curious glances followed as he walked to the front door and opened it. To everyone's surprise, there stood Tonya, looking absolutely stunning in a simple yet elegant dress. For weeks, Pedro had been inviting Tonya to dinner, but she always declined. This time, however, she finally accepted. Pedro turned to face Estevao, his eyes shining with restrained tears. "I love you, brother," he whispered. Estevao struggled to keep his own emotions in check. He was usually reserved and disliked showing his feelings, but seeing Pedro's genuine gratitude and affection for the woman who had saved his life deeply moved him. It was a testament to the depth of their brotherly bond. When Estevao's eyes met Tonya's, a different emotion stirred within him. He saw a beautiful and strong woman who had been through so much. The scars she once hid with her scarf were now invisible, but it was her inner strength and resilience that truly captivated him. He felt a connection, a tug, something he hadn't experienced in a long time. In that moment, amidst the warm embrace of family and love, new beginnings were sprouting. Estevao could feel it in his bones. It was the start of something significant. Tonya smiled, realizing that the kindness she had given in the past was returning to her in the most unexpected ways.